The CEP is a journey into the universe of podcasting. We listen, we review, we rant, and you enjoy. Critical thinking is mandatory, so put on your thinking caps and welcome to the Cerebral Entertainment
Podcast.
And we are back with yet another riveting edition of the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast.
You just look like my bulldog. That was crazy.
The look on your face. I came out of left field with that one, I know.
Were you shaking something off there or what?
I tell you what, I'm very hopped up on coffee right now.
Okay.
For the listeners, I had Colt's wife make me what I thought was going to be a cup of coffee, and she comes out with this big Yeti type of thing, and it's like 3 feet tall. And so I've been totally drinking a lot of coffee, and yeah, I'm a little caffeinated right now.
She's making you drink coffee like she drinks coffee.
Right, well, that's okay. I like coffee a lot, and I like to have some coffee before I do my podcasting because it just stimulates the mind.
There you go.
Gets the juices flowing. My thoughts, sometimes they may run into each other. Sometimes my mind works quicker than my mouth does, but it is a stimulating experience, and that's what I want Cerebral to be. The Cerebral Entertainment Podcast should be stimulating,
right.
And I am stimulated by this, whatever kind of coffee she made. It's good, though. It's good.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
You're going to need that, man. I don't know. For me, this is weird. We haven't been just like face-to-face talking in over a month, probably, right? At least.
It's been a long time, and I guess I should say that I am James, and with me, as always, is my co-host Colt.
Yeah, I'm still Colt. I'm still here.
Yeah, I had to make sure because it has been so long.
Right.
And of course, we've been doing some interviews. We've had interviews during our past 2 shows, both great times. Had a great time on both of those interviews, and so this show is, as you listeners know, primarily based on reviewing podcasts that we love so much.
Mm-hmm.
We like to get out there and float around in the podcast universe and see what gravity takes us to, and some of the podcasts have a lot of gravity.
Right.
And some of them we just kind of float on by and we talk about them and we keep floating. Others tend to stick to us, but here lately we've been doing some interviews and it's been a good time. And we will continue to have some interviews and some on locations. Would like to remind everybody that our April 22nd date at the winery is coming up quickly.
Very soon.
Yes, and for anybody who can make it, we would love to see you out there. It's going to be a great time. We're going to show the St. Francis Winery our love. And so if you need directions to that, don't know where it's at, you can always go to the Facebook page. There is an event that is posted on there, and it gives the address, and you plug that right into your handy-dandy GPS. That artificial intelligence will lead you right to the winery and eventually to your demise because AI is going to take over the universe.
Don't start.
I can't help it. It's everywhere. If you're out there listening to podcasts, the AI discussion is everywhere, and I think for good reason. Mm-hmm. As everyone knows, I am fearful of artificial intelligence and just technology in general, which I love the technology, but I fear the proliferation and the all-encompassing nature of what technology is going to eventually define the world as opposed to being a tool. I'm afraid that one day us monkey men will be tools for the computers.
It's a good thing to be afraid of.
I mean, is it too much Matrix-like? Or am I going on the right track here, or what? What are we doing?
I don't know, man. I'm worried.
Yeah. Hey, what's the
score
score
here? To say the least, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of afraid of who's keeping score. I think the computers will soon take us over.
Yeah.
That's just.
Speaking of AI, man, I have an idea. So those little Roomba things, those little robots that clean your floors and go around?
Yeah.
They need to make something like that that's a lawnmower.
Dude, that's a great idea.
I know, right?
That's an absolutely great idea.
Yeah. It just when a tree's in the way, it just finds its way around it. And then when it's done, it has a docking station that it can get into. That'd be amazing.
Wow. Yeah. But I'm afraid what that lawnmower might do. If that lawnmower gets mad and decides that it's greater than me,
it's going to cut my head off.
It's going to come and at least cut my feet off. It might catch me as I'm laying in my hammock and work its way up the tree and slice me right at the neck. Who knows?
So speaking of lawnmowers, one of my lawnmowers is just kind of crapped out, but we've had it for quite a while, and it's kind of sat out in the weather and stuff. So just bought a new one yesterday, and I got it out for the first time today to do the first mow of the year.
Nice.
Got the thing out there, and it is a monster of it's a push mower, but it's an all-wheel drive push mower and self-propelled and all.
Sweet.
It's got this little knob on it that you can use a wrench to turn on how much force you want that thing to do. Well, I didn't mess with it or anything like that. So I get to my backyard's a huge hill. So I get to the hill and I push that thing down, and it popped a wheelie on me. Like, it cranked me back. Like, I thought I was going to fall down the hill. That's how much force this thing had behind it when I pushed that down.
Dude.
It was nuts.
Can you, like, ride it down the street? I mean,
It'd be awesome if I could.
I'm telling you. Like one of those, they call them push-behinds, but you actually ride on it?
Yeah, my neighbor's got one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think it's called push-behind, something like that.
It's like it looks like what's that thing that Paul Blart Mall Cop rides around in?
Yeah, the Segway.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's a lawnmower.
Sweet.
Yeah.
You should see my grass right now. It is like, it's at least 2 feet tall. And I live in a subdivision, and so I do not ever like to be the last guy in the subdivision to cut my grass. But guess what? Right now, I'm the last guy in the subdivision to cut my grass. And it sucks. I hate it because every time I pull up to the house, I just know I can feel my neighbor's eyes peering through the window saying, there he is. He's the guy with the jungle of a yard who hasn't cut his grass yet. And I have this neighbor, and he's always the last guy to cut his grass. Well, I walked into the house the other day, and I told my wife, I was like, guess what my frickin' neighbor did? And she's, with a surprised look, she's like, what? I said, he cut his grass. And she got it, because
right.
I've always counted. He's my anchor, right?
Right.
He's my anchor. And I think I am his anchor, too, because he knows that when I cut my grass, he's right next to me. He's like, man, I got to cut my grass soon because of my frickin' neighbor. Well, this time he's the frickin' neighbor. And so it's a bad deal. I cannot stand having the tall grass in the subdivision. It drives me nuts.
I'd probably send some hate mail his way if I were you.
I'm thinking about it. Maybe a burning bag of poo.
Well, yeah, that could work.
Go
You
old
just
school on him.
Throw it at him from your yard.
I've just got to collect some dog poo is all.
Oh, okay.
It shouldn't be too difficult.
I wouldn't think so.
No, as a matter of fact, I have this other neighbor down the way a little bit. They love to bring their dog on my yard so that he can poo.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'll just start collecting that because it'll then have a purpose.
There you go. You kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
And get out some aggression in the process as I'm flinging poo like a chimpanzee. Why not, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I got to cut my grass. There's that. But it's going to get done tomorrow. It's going to be a process because I just use a push mower too. And yeah, it's going to suck. It's going to suck. And I don't have some super hooty, high-propelled, high-tech lawnmower like you. It's not a bad lawnmower, but it's just seems like it sits low. The deck is low. And so it's going to take some work. So I have to do this thing where I tilt it up and go forward and then come back. And then it's like takes triple the time to mow my lawn that way. So it's going to suck.
Well, like my front yard's not too bad because it's mainly flat. I mainly wanted to get a really good self-propelled mower that's got a lot of power because my backyard. That backyard is a straight up hill, and if there's nothing helping me push that up that hill, going down's easy.
Right.
But coming back up it, get your shoulders burning for sure.
If there was just a way where you could always go down, I'm not sure how that would work.
I'd end up in a massive hole.
Well, I mean,
there's like a big ditch line at the back side of my yard, so.
It was a thought. I didn't have a solution. I just thought it would be nice.
Right. It would be nice. I give you that.
Yeah. So yeah, how's your week been? Besides getting new grass cutters.
That's the gist of my week.
That's been your highlight?
That's been the great.
Hey, I tell you what, that's a great highlight, especially since you got such a fantastic mower to use.
Right. No, actually, so last weekend we went to this cancer benefit.
Oh yeah.
And this. Basically what it was, all I knew it was going to be a stand-up comedian that was there. I didn't know anything about him or anything like that, but, it was a benefit, and it was a lot of people that I knew that I went to school with, some teachers that were my teachers in school and stuff like that were there and stuff. So we got there, and everybody's joking around because there's this guy walking around, and he's got like a sleeveless shirt on. He's a bigger guy, sleeveless shirt on, and everybody's calling him Larry the Cable Guy, just joking around because he looks just like Larry the Cable Guy.
Nice.
Well, 20 minutes later, this guy's the one that's stepping on stage, and he does a Larry the Cable Guy bit or act. He sounds just like him when he talks and everything, but he doesn't do exactly his act. It was actually really good. It really surprised me.
Good. That was a cancer benefit.
It was.
Okay, so it's a way to make
Mhm.
cancer funny in a
Right.
sense. Why not?
Right.
Were there any cancer jokes, actually? Not that I condone such things, just curious.
I don't think there was.
Okay.
He probably was smart enough to stay away from that.
Yeah.
But I will tell you a joke that was really funny that he gave.
Okay.
He said he apologized because he was walking around with a limp, and he went to the doctor and had a mole removed, and that was the last time that he poops outside.
Okay. That's funny. I like it.
It was so funny because I'm like cracking up laughing, and my wife's looking at me. She's like, "What? And like 10 seconds later, she's like, "That took me a second, but that's funny."
Yeah. Oh, a mole. I get it.
Yeah,
There's a little furry animal attached to him.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that cracked me up.
That's good stuff.
Yeah,
That's good
It's
stuff.
a good time though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joe Rogan or Bo Burnham, nobody stopped by.
I was really hoping, man.
Yeah.
I was, but nothing.
Tom Segura, no.
No.
Okay.
I didn't get them out of my $15 that I paid.
That surprises me, especially
right?
in that area.
Right.
So, yeah, man, I had a pretty good week.
Mhm.
I had one of those times where you have something that comes up and you need to shine, right? You need for your best. You need to put your best foot forward, okay? And so I had a meeting with a doctor who was going to start servicing like pretty much half of our buildings that offer behavioral health services. And so there are times where I either don't say the right things or stick my foot in my mouth, so on and so forth. And so when I do have a shining moment, they kind of stick with me, and I try to be very cerebral about things, and I learn from that, because we learn from our mistakes more so, but that only happens. It's only effective when you learn from your mistakes and you're able to build off of that. If you just have a mistake and then you just spend the next 5 years toiling over that mistake, like when I'm trying to sleep at 10 o'clock at night and all of a sudden all those things come rushing back to my head of all those times it sucked, then it's not very effective. But this was one of those successful times for me where I was able, and I'll kind of give you the framing. So I was with one of my colleagues. She also works at the corporate level, and she was doing a lot of the talking, which she usually does. She's a great marketer. But she was speaking with the doctor, and I realized that I was being quiet all this time. And oftentimes that awkward silence on my part, well, it feels awkward. Let me start out like that. It makes me feel awkward, and so it makes me nervous, and then therefore I tend to jump in and do something, say something that later I'm like, man, that really sucked. I wish I wouldn't have said something.
Right.
And I'm always my own worst critic. I understand that too. And so I realized that other people don't criticize me to the same degree that I do, at least to the most part. So I was noticing the silence, and I was kind of but I took a step back at that point. I was like, you know what? Just be yourself. Just wait for the right time, and then roll with it, And so it happened, when there was a chance for me to jump in and give my presentation about what I do, the services that we provide on my end, and how programs work, and what we expect from this particular psychiatrist. It was like butter. It flowed like butter. And so that kind of segues into the first review that we're going to do, because it's about being intentional. It's about being mindful of the situation, and kind of that moment where you are at one with yourself, and you kind of almost step outside of, figuratively of course, but you kind of step outside of your own body and see yourself in action, and when things just work out right, And so those things to me are highlights. And I wanted to bring it up because not just because I wanted to brag on that particular instance that I had, because, people have those kinds of instances all the time. I've had several myself.
Right.
This is just what happened this past week, but I just wanted to bring it to light because I wanted to highlight how we should always be looking for these moments in our life, those successful times where we can say, okay, self, you did a great job that time. Now do it again. Build from that.
Mm-hmm.
Be conscious, be mindful of what you're doing, and take a step back. Think about things. Don't just let diarrhea of the mouth take hold and cause yourself more things to stress out about, to worry about later on when you're trying to sleep, 5 years down the road, and you're thinking, man, I screwed that one up big time, and that could have been a great opportunity.
Right.
Well,
okay. I have an interesting question for you here.
Okay.
Something that I thought about over this past week, just with some situations that I've dealt with. So doing a little bit of training at work, my question for you is, you train people, and I want to know, as far as expectations go with people that you train, when you bring somebody, say somebody new in that you haven't ever trained before, do you automatically have an expectation for a certain amount or a certain person? I mean, I know you know exactly what kind of job they're going to need to do or what kind of things they're going to need to do, but as far as an expectation, as far as how well they're going to do their job, do you have that automatically, or do you think that you have to work with the person for a while before you can really gain an expectation off of what they should be able to do?
That's actually a great question, because I think that if you have a blanket expectation of people in general, okay, so we're using this particular circumstance of me training someone to do a particular job, but just in life we can also kind of generalize too. But in this specific case, if I blanket everyone the same way and I have the same expectation for everyone, chances are most of the time that person is going to fail. And not just that person, people after people after people. You have to individualize your approach to everyone. Just like with a speaker, if you're a public speaker or say you're a podcast speaker, you have to always consider your audience. And sometimes your audience is just an audience of one. Okay, and so you have to definitely tailor that training to your audience of one. And so there are going to be general expectations that have to be met. Like, say, for instance, if you're training someone to do group facilitation, they have to be able to speak. They have to be able to present themselves in a professional but understandable manner. Because if they don't, then obviously the listeners, the clients, are not going to gain anything from the speaking that you do. And so there has to be a certain approach that you use. Having said that, how do you present yourself? What kind of are you more of a somebody that uses words eloquently, or do you use a whiteboard where you can make illustrations, or whatever it is that you do? Do you stand up or do you sit down? There's all different kinds of ways that people present themselves. So you have to give people the opportunity to present themselves the best that they can, because people are so different,
right?
And it's a great question, because that transcends into everyday life too. Say you have expectations of a wife or of a friend or whoever, of a coworker, whatever, even an employer. If you are too narrow, if you're too obtuse, and your expectations, your constraints, your parameters are too tight, then those people are going to step outside those parameters, and you're going to lose them. You're going to lose that connection. You have to be somewhat fluid, and obviously this has limitations. You can't just let everybody just run wild. In training someone, if I'm training someone to work on a secure unit, for instance, and they can't be ethical in their practices, then I can't allow that to happen. That's not them presenting themselves. That's them overstepping a boundary, and
right.
You can't have that.
Right.
But some people are louder and they're more authoritative. Some people are quieter and they're more diplomatic. And so you have to find what works for that person and try to nurture that and be strength-based. And that's solution-focused.
Right.
And that's some of the topics I'll be talking about in the Cerebral sessions coming up is being solution-focused in your approach to life and people in general.
Right. I've just seen just some stuff like at work. And I asked about expectations because, like, one person in particular, I'm not going to name any names, of course, but one person in particular. So I try to be a motivator as much as I can when I go into work, and when they start their job, I try to give them advice on what they can do to make their job easier, what they can do to make their job better, things like that. But just like any other employee, I try to gradually give them more things to do as they progress themselves, right?
Sure.
Well, at some points, it gets to where if I progress them, they can keep up for a little bit doing that. But like with what I do, it's kind of a time. You're constantly going type of thing, because you have to keep up with things as you're moving. It's factory work. You know how that goes.
Right.
You got to keep up with things so things don't get all out of hand.
Right.
So as I've progressed, I can give him more stuff to do, but he gets to where if I give him too much, he doesn't know how to make it. He doesn't know how to make it a motivator for himself, as in, like, I can do this. I'm gonna put all my effort into it. It's more of he gets overwhelmed really fast, and all of a sudden he just slows down and accepts that he's not going to be able to get it, and just takes his time and just accepts it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And for me as a trainer, it's hard to it's hard to find that line on where you should progress somebody and where you should keep them stagnant where they're at for for a longer time. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
It does, but I think you found it. I think you found, if you looked and dissected the situation even more closely, you could probably pinpoint the exact, maybe it's the speed or the amount of work given the amount of time that he has to get that work done, but you could probably pinpoint it almost just exactly where his breaking point is. But the fact that you're conscious that he has that breaking point, because not everybody motivates the same way.
Right.
And this once again, this translates into life in general. I see people like this all the time. If you give them so much, then they become overwhelmed mentally, and it affects their motor skills. It affects their motivation. It affects everything about them at that point. And so that doesn't do anybody any good. So if you're serious about training this individual, you have to find what his strengths are and his speed, his method of learning and his speed of learning, and nurture that to build off of those strengths, because you can't train him built off of your strengths. Those are yours. Right. Now, there's going to be people out there like you who you can connect with and say, okay, this guy learns like me, he works like me, I'm gonna slam him, I'm gonna give him all this work to do, and he's going to excel because that's what drives him, that challenge. But for other people, that challenge just overwhelms them, and they shut down. And so obviously the work's not getting done. And in that field, in any field, but it's about getting the work done, whatever that work is. It's about the ends to the means to the end, rather.
Right. And I think it's really important what you said, that you can't train somebody to your strengths. You have to train them to their strengths. And I find myself in that debacle a lot, actually, because I think about what I'm able to do and how I'm able to do it. And other people, they might be able to do something, but not the exact way that you do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's a fine line there that I'm trying to figure out how to get through.
The very fact that you're questioning it, though, is huge. The first step to any kind of progress, unless it's completely accidental, which usually doesn't happen, sometimes it does, but it's being intentional. It's being mindful of the situation. So you're mindful that the training technique that you're using might not be effective for him, and so therefore you've got a launching pad, you've got a starting point to tailor your method of training. And so you can tailor that to him, because if you weren't conscious of that in the first place, you would be oblivious to the need to alter your technique in order to train this individual in a better way. And this goes, once again, this can go for any relationship that you have with anybody.
Right.
A lot of people are not mindful. They're so self-oriented, they're so self-involved that they don't pay attention to how people are actually responding to them. And this can be from nervousness, and I can speak to this from personal experience. I used to have such a tendency to be self-conscious of what I was doing. I wasn't paying enough attention to how people were responding to me. And so like back in elementary and even high school, people actually thought I was a snob, and I was so oblivious as to how could you possibly think that. But it's because I was shy, and the actions the behaviors that I was exhibiting and the responses that I was giving caused them to think I wasn't a great person, and it took me a long time to come to terms with the fact that was on me. It was a lot of that was in my control, not universally, not 100%, but a lot of that was in my control. And so people are like that all the time. We have to be mindful of the situation at hand and live in that moment in order to fully benefit from anything that life has in that particular moment, because you will never, ever have that particular moment again in your life.
Right.
Like right now, me saying this, pointing this at you emphatically like I'm doing right now, we will never have this exact moment like this again. We may have one similar, one like it, never this one again.
Right.
And that's an amazing thought to me. So you really, it just behooves us to be so mindful of every moment that we can, because you never know what the universe has in store for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, and I thought that that these subjects were a great segue to the first podcast review that we have today. And so for your review, I offered, well, I'll let you go ahead and say it, Colt. What did I offer you to review this week?
You offered Tony Robbins Podcast.
Okay.
So he had Jordan Harbinger on there from AOC, Art of Charm, which, of course, we're big fans of.
Huge fans of Jordan.
Right.
And before you go on, I will say that this is why I offered this review, because Tony doesn't even actually host this show. He has someone else do it, and they don't even mention her name on the show notes, and so I don't have much information there. But it's just because it was Jordan. I wanted to hear him interviewed,
right?
Because I think that much of him, and usually he's doing the interviewing on the AOC, And so I thought it would be great for us to delve into his mind per him being interviewed.
Well, I'm really curious on this because I don't know if you caught in the episode or not. I don't know if this is just like a network that Tony Robbins has set up and he just has somebody do the podcast for him, or if this is a podcast that he started doing himself and then he branched off and let somebody else do it. But if you noticed, there was a part in the middle of the podcast where Jordan mentioned that if you're a business owner or whatever, and you start a podcast on your own, and then later down the line you decide that you don't want to do this anymore, you want to let somebody else do it, that you've lost credibility and you're going to lose listeners because of that. And I'm thinking, was this kind of a shot at this show? Is that what happened here, or what? Do you know what I mean?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think Tony Robbins could. I don't think he could mar his respectability, his reputation,
Right.
by having someone else do a podcast under his name. I think that what Jordan was talking about, because he was mentioning, like, he even talked about being a car salesman, and so doing a podcast talking about cars, and so that is something that you're using, a vehicle you're using. Get it, vehicle?
Right.
Kind of worked out that way, but it is something you're using in order to promote your business. And so what you're doing when you start podcasting is that you start building a relationship with your listeners.
Right.
You know?
Mhm.
And so after that, it's like having a best friend, and then the best friend saying, okay, well, I'm out, but I want you to be best friends with this guy from now on. And you're like, I don't know this guy. And you know a lot about me. Where are you going, you know?
Right.
And so it could maybe apply to Tony Robbins, but I don't think so. I think it's more like if it's somebody building up from scratch. Tony Robbins was so well established already by the time
Right.
this podcast ever came around.
Right.
He's been around forever.
Right.
And so I don't think he was mentioning that on his behalf, but I think that's a great point that you brought up, because I didn't catch that. That's funny.
So where do you want to start with this? Do you want to talk about like the beginnings of Jordan, like how he started out, or what do you think?
If there's anything you feel like that's worth mentioning, go for it.
Well, I mean, like the big points at the beginning where he talks about that he realized that he needed to go farther in life because once he had a 4-year degree, tried to get a job at Best Buy, and he couldn't get a job at Best Buy with a 4-year degree.
From Michigan.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he decided to go to law school, and apparently he only decided to go to law school because his aunt or somebody told him that he liked to argue with people. So then he's like, all right, I could be a good lawyer. So he went to law school. And then after that, started working on Wall Street. And then he starts telling the story about how his boss, who was a young partner, he noticed that he was never in the office, or he was never at the firm, and wanted to know why. So when he asked, the partner told him that he brings in the deal flow, so it's more important for him to be out pulling deals in than being in the firm every day.
Right.
And I thought this is a really good topic that we could segue off of a little bit, because it's not about, and I think this applies to everything, every job you do, everything. I think it's not about how many hours you put in, it's about what you do with the hours that you're putting in.
I think that's a great point, because it comes down to your worth. And the way that Jordan put it is that he notes how value is based on trading time for your money in lower level jobs. So in other words, you make $10 an hour, and so the more hours you work, the more money you make, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more those hours bring in. And as you get to higher level jobs, it is having leverage. You know, it's having the leverage because you bring in business, for instance. Like this particular lawyer was never in the office. He was never at the firm, and yet he was a partner. And so that begs the question, what is this guy doing? Because you're supposed to be a workhorse as a lawyer, especially, you know, at that high of a level on Wall Street. Like Jordan said, everybody's working 20 hours sleeping under their desk.
Right.
And so this guy obviously had something going on, and it really sparked Jordan's curiosity. And, you know, it's basically about how valuable relationships are, the value of relationship building, because this guy had made it as a partner by building relationships and sending business that way, you know. And so I think that's something that there's nothing wrong with hourly work, you know, but I think something that we should aspire to if we are adventurous, if we have that desire, I guess. I know some people who have been perfectly content with the hourly job. You know, they don't want to have to think on their feet. They don't want to have to do something that gets them out of those those parameters because then they may feel uncomfortable, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But for some people, they're absolutely miserable working the 9 to 5,
Right.
and they don't know how to get out of it. And for Jordan, it was building relationships. He learned that, which social capital is his thing. You know, how social capital, you can use that to your benefit in life, in life, love, relationships, all that good stuff. And so that's how he learned, okay, this was his spark. Okay, this guy's building relationships and still making a killing, making a ton of money, and he's never at the office.
Right.
So in other words, he's probably always out, eating and drinking with prospective clients.
Mm-hmm.
Fitting the law firm's fitting the bill. You know, he's not paying for it, and he's out just kind of chilling and talking, using, you know, what his strength that he has.
Mm-hmm.
He's using that in order to make money and be happy at life. And I just think the moral of the story is to branch out and find your flow. You know, you got to find your flow state. You got to find what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that was his approach. And so, you know, having a lot of relationships versus quality relationships was another thing he mentioned.
Right. Did you know, I've never heard this before, but did you know that attorneys bill in 6-minute increments?
I did not.
Okay, I was wondering if that was a well-known thing or not, because he kind of made it seem like it was obvious that they did that, but that's nuts.
If you're a lawyer, it is obvious, but it makes sense though. It makes sense because even in my line of work in mental health, if you are working for the Department of Mental Health, you work in units, and each unit is 15 minutes. So, you know, if you work 45 minutes, that's 3 units. And it's just a way to measure the time that you spend with the face time you spend with a client, because that's how you bill.
Right.
Because you might think that lawyers or mental health professionals or whomever might bill hourly. But in a lot of instances, interaction doesn't last an hour. And so it's just a way to have that broken down already to simplify the billing process.
Gotcha.
You know, and so, yeah, lawyers, I didn't know they billed in 6-minute increments, but it makes sense to me.
Right, that's crazy.
Yeah, because then you have 10 increments in an hour. And so it's just easy to break it down from there, you know.
True, yeah.
Right? If you worked, 5 units, you can take 5 plus 6, you work 30 minutes. It's cool like that. It's addition, man.
Right. So kind of get into AOC itself. So basically, Jordan started AOC after trying to get ahead on Wall Street and kind of, I guess, converted into this relationship building and networking platform that he's got now.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to describe to somebody else to listen to Art of Charm podcast, what would be your description on to win them over on listening to it? What would you say to them?
The Art of Charm?
Uh-huh.
The Art of Charm at its very basic level can be described as Jordan Harbinger, who is a very funny guy. He's very witty, kind of an edgy sense of humor, and not edgy as in like obscene or anything like that. He's very quick-witted, and sometimes I can almost see him as some people thinking that he might be too sharp for them. Like, hey, can you slow down with this sense of humor because I can't keep up. But most people are going to get it, especially podcast listeners, because y'all are the smartest people on the planet. But it is Jordan interviewing authors. So, and most of these books are dealing with relationships, with moving forward, with interpersonal relationships, getting further in your career, just all kinds of the cool things that move you forward in life. And Jordan's, one of his biggest catchphrases is social capital. It's a term that he uses all the time. Building social capital. And what that's a kind of a fancy way of saying building effective and beneficial relationships. And so once you build social capital, for instance, what you do is you always offer value to somebody. And I've actually been working on this for a long time myself, adding value to someone, because not necessarily that you expect dividends, but it's the only way that you will ever truly make those relationships that you have beneficial. And that's the quality relationship versus the quantity of relationships. Mm-hmm. So you can have 100 friends, for instance, and every one of those friends suck. And they don't know you very well. You don't know them very well. You might see them at a party, you laugh, and you might turn away from each other and it's like, yeah, I don't even really know that guy, but he's my friend. Versus 5 really good friends who you know everything about, and you might give the shirt off your back for the other guy, or you might just really know each other, and you might build from each other's successes. You might build each other up to the point to where this relationship is beneficial because he knows how to encourage me to where I am a better person because I know this guy, And so those are quality relationships. That's just one example of quality relationship, but That's basically what social capital means. It means building capital, like, building your resources in people that, and it's reciprocal. It goes both ways. It's a two-way street. But you always do that by adding value. You add value, you add value. And if you make a life worth of adding value, then you get somewhere in life. And that's what he does. He brings these authors on, gives them a platform to speak from, and it fuels his own show. And he also makes connections like that. He networks. And I didn't realize until more recently how many other big-name podcasters have Jordan on their show to speak. Yeah, several of them do. And that's awesome. I love that.
Well, like you said, one of the points that they make is you're only as good as your top 5 friends, is what they said.
Right.
And I kind of talked about this in my Cerebral session, which we can explain a little bit about. But I explained that, like, when I was growing up and I was in high school and I was really trying to kind of find myself and find, who I am,
right.
I would basically, what I would do was kind of like take, I guess, my favorite attributes or what I thought was cool or what I liked about my different parts of my different friends, and I kind of took those attributes for myself and used them as myself to kind of build my own character, build myself, really.
Right.
So I don't know that I necessarily took the best attributes or picked the best friends to use their characteristics as my own.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of the same scenario. Is you're only as good as your top 5 friends.
Right.
So you got to pick who's going to elevate you in life. You've got to pick who's going to keep you on a right direction in your life instead of anybody who brings you down.
That's right.
But the only issue that I thought about when I was listening to this with that is that I don't necessarily think that you have to eliminate anybody in your life who isn't there elevating you every step of the way, if that makes sense.
It does, and that's kind of a conundrum to an extent, because Jordan does talk a lot about not being around low energy people that drain you, that do not cause you to be a better person yourself.
Right.
There needs to be a reciprocal conscious effort on the part of people, the people that you are with, to build each other up, to make each other better people, and to try and help others network and to try to help others get a shot at something, or just to encourage them and make them feel better so that they go out with more confidence. But you're right, at some point in time, you're going to have to be the one. You don't have to be, but I guess if you're going to be a good person, there's going to be people in your life that you want to build them up, even though it's not reciprocal. I think, by my understanding from just contemplating what you said, I think there has to be a cutoff point. Like if someone is draining you, if they're taking advantage, or if you just notice that you don't have the strength to be around them, they just bring you down. They bring your energy level down to a low that it's not beneficial to you anymore. Then you have to separate yourself from that to some extent.
Right.
Now there are going to be some caveats there. There are going to be some people like family members. I mean, you still don't have to hang around them all the time. You still don't have to let them influence you.
Right.
You got to find that cutoff point.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to take care of yourself, and the main reason is so that you can help take care of other people. And so it's not a selfish endeavor in that way.
Right.
You don't want to be selfish and say it's all about me. I'm out to get mine. I'm out to get my paper, my cheddar.
Right.
It's not about that, but it's about keeping yourself healthy so that you are able to help others, because you can't help others if you can't help yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's that. I mean, you've got to stay healthy and you've got to stay upbeat for, if nothing else, for the sake of everybody around you.
Right. So they talk about that the art of charm is about showing people how to use their strengths and how to leverage that in their life. So talks about introverted people who aren't that vocal, aren't that, they don't get out there and show who they are, basically, I guess you could say.
Yeah, the quiet types.
Yeah, the quiet types. But somebody could be introverted, but also be a very creative person, which I think maybe the majority of the time that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. You're people who do art and all that kind of stuff. A lot of those people aren't talking to people all the time, stuff like that. They're very quiet. They're very calm and to themselves on that kind of thing. But they try to help people leverage that to make use their strengths for themselves to make them better in life. And with that, I wanted to kind of talk about, I know you had talked to Jordan a little bit through Twitter, I think it was,
yep.
And he had mentioned that maybe you coming down and doing one of the training camps and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Would you want to describe the training camp that he does, or?
Well, only to the extent that I know about it. I don't know a whole lot about it.
Okay.
He asked if I wanted some information on it, and I told him straight up, I'm like, look, I have 2 small kids. I'm very busy with work, and I don't have, a whole lot of jack to spend on coming out to California.
Right.
Although I think it's great. I would love to do the training camp one day.
Mm-hmm.
But you go out to the Los Angeles area somewhere, and they'd have what's called a training camp, and it's I guess social capital training camp. It's all about just self-improvement, basically, is what it is. And you go out there, and it's just like this week-long experience where you're working with other people, other trainees, and Jordan is there with his partner, and they are just going over this science-based evidence that they have to make you a better, more socially adaptable, higher performing person. That's another term they like to use, is high performers. They only work with high performers, and he actually touts that all the things they do on the AOC, it's science-based. So they're not just thinking, hey, that's a pretty good idea, it worked for this guy over here, I'm going to throw this into the mix of the training that we do. He actually backs up everything he does with some kind of scientific evidence, which I think is pretty cool. If you get into social sciences, if you get into social psychology and things like that, it's basically just what works best in social situations, and a lot of it's derived from the high performers that are in business and education and things like that. But it's science based, so he finds studies that have been done on these things and uses that to back him up. And so you just train. He shows different techniques. He's got one technique. I might be brutalizing the term here, but it's something like walking through the door. Okay, and so this technique is where anytime you walk through any door, in your house, if you're going to the bathroom, it doesn't matter if anybody's anywhere near, every time you walk through the door, you make a conscious effort to make sure your back is straight, make sure your head is up, and make sure you're smiling. It's a exercise in being confident, okay? And so when you do that, I think he said for, I don't remember how long, a week, 2 weeks, something like that, you just start doing it naturally. It starts to become a habit, and of course there's the adage that anything done for 21 days becomes a habit. But I can see that happening. This is one of the techniques that he just mentioned in this podcast that they use. When you do that, it becomes a habit, and they work on all these techniques in order for people to be more confident, to be better performers, to be high performers, to just be better people socially in business, whatever they want to achieve at. And so he also mentions that there are several different levels that people come in. Everybody from the shy guy who has no friends and maybe wants a girlfriend and doesn't know how to do it because he's just never had that zing about him, right? To business professionals who just want to excel further and polish their skills. He says they'll take anybody out there who just wants to practice some self-improvement techniques, and so that's what they do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, to go back to what you were talking about nonverbal communication is how they explain it, like how standing up straight, smile on your face when you walk in the door, stuff like that. But they also talk about first impression, that people think that your first impression is like you walking up and introducing yourself to somebody, but that's not your first impression.
Right.
Your first impression is the second that you walk in the door and people see you, the way you walk around, the way you talk, all those kind of things. That's your first impression.
Yeah.
And I just in my head as a mental image, I was thinking about a guy walking into a bar and slumped over or whatever, just not looking like he's the confident guy, and then walking up to a table full of girls and then trying to, get one of them or whatever, to date him or whatever you want to say.
Right.
But they seen him the way he looked when he walked in the door, that automatically might just flip a switch at them and be like, no, this ain't happening. There's no way.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. When you become conscious of that, and some people do it more naturally. Some people, if you're naturally confident, then you don't have to think about how am I looking when I walk through the door because you're already there.
Right.
But for other people, like me coming up, I was very shy, and I guarantee you that I put off the kind of vibes where people just are like, hey, who's this guy? What's he doing here? And why is he trying to talk to me? So being conscious of that is a huge first step, because when you say, hi, my name's James, that's actually your introduction. Your first impression is you first walking in the door, and that's where walking through the doorway, that technique, helps you out, because you become accustomed to just having that confident air about you wherever you go, And if you can walk into the bathroom every time in your own house and do that, it's gonna really solidify that habit.
But I think there's a fine line between the confidence aspect and being too overconfident, or turning confidence into being cocky or arrogant or something like that. But I was thinking about that, and I was trying to think about anybody in my life, like from a day-to-day basis, people that I interact with, whether it's people that I talk to every day, like at work or whatever, or outside of that. I don't think that I see very much of that anymore. Do you? Like, do you think that you run into people a lot that just have a really cocky, arrogant air about them?
I mean, I do, but I think maybe what you're seeing is because of the lens that you're looking through, because perhaps you have gained confidence over the years that it doesn't stick out as much. Like, it's not as noticeable that these people seem overly confident. Because now for me, I see people who put on the air of confidence, but I can look pretty easily, pretty readily, and tell that it's a facade, because these people are suffering from low self-esteem. It's actually they have a low self-confidence, and so that facade is very easy to see. I probably couldn't see that so clearly, say 15 years ago, especially,
right.
And especially before that, even when I was a kid and in my teens, I wasn't able to see that because I was too conscious, self-conscious about myself. I was too busy with that. And when I did see somebody who had an air of confidence, like the school bully or something like that, then it just seemed like confidence to me, because I didn't really have the self-concept to know any better to reflect that from.
Right.
And so maybe that's what you're seeing. I don't know. That's I know that's the case for me.
That's a possibility.
Because I'm sure there's just as many a-holes out there as there ever been.
Well, I'm sure there is. I guess I just feel like from a day-to-day basis, I don't feel like I come across a lot of people that are like that, except for maybe in the gym. And
that's to be expected, right?
Well, yeah, yes and no. The majority of people, for one, I don't talk to very many people, if anybody, when I'm in the gym. My goal, I have a set goal when I walk in the door of the gym, and that's to put my headphones in and get the work done and leave.
Right.
So I don't talk to very many people unless somebody comes up to ask me for something or whatever. You can tell there's some guys in there that are cocky, and it's more funny to me than anything, especially the guys that aren't that big,
right?
That walk around like they're a lot bigger than they actually are, and try to throw around me. Me and you were talking earlier off air about how it's so important to be like the mind muscle connection when you're lifting, and how it's important not to just throw a bunch of weight on a bar and try to bench it or whatever. But you see those guys all the time in the gym, especially new guys who their form is just terrible, and you just know they're going to hurt themselves anytime.
Right.
I think it's normal for a gym, I guess. And that's one of the main reasons why when I get in there, I just put on my headphones and don't worry about anybody else or anything else around me.
Yeah, it goes back to being conscious of, being mindful of that moment. Like we were talking about earlier, when you're mindful of what muscles are being used while you're lifting, a particular type of weight, or whatever type or whatever area of your body that you're trying to focus on, you should be able to feel that and have that mind muscle connection.
Right.
And it's the same with interaction. To be conscious of that, to be conscious of the connection that's being made, is super important. And Jordan even brought up that we evolved to read nonverbal language much easier than words, which I thought was a great concept, because he utilized the notion that, back in caveman times when it was just all ooh, ooh, ah, ah, ooh, 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 they had to read body language like as in aggression. You couldn't tell by ooh, ah, they were just grunts, up until the time that language began to form. But we learned how to use that as a survival technique, because you could spot when someone was aggressive, or you could spot when someone was weak, and you could take their cave over, or you could take their piece of meat up from the saber-toothed tiger that they just killed or whatever. The woolly mammoth. Those were good eating back then. A
lot of meat.
Yeah, that was like going to like Colton's or something, some steakhouse. It's like going to a buffet style. I was trying to think of a great buffet, but there's not a whole lot of great buffets out there anymore, except for Chinese food, and some of that might be saber-tooth tiger. I don't know. But he also talked about, and this really stuck with me, uncomfortable breeds uncomfortable when interacting. So when you are uncomfortable when interacting, and this really strikes home with me, and this kind of goes back to the story I told earlier about my meeting with the doctor. When you're nervous, unconsciously that person picks up on that, and they also kind of become nervous. So the situation becomes awkward. So uncomfortability breeds uncomfortability. It's very, very beneficial to be conscious of your level of comfort when speaking to someone. That's why it was so important for me, even though I was doing it mostly intuitively at that point in time. I did know to be mindful. I took myself out of the situation, took a step back, just kind of did, some goose fraba type of, just chill, and be you, and instead of getting caught up in the moment and getting nervous, I just took a step back and let it come as it did, and it was so much smoother. And that's kind of what he's talking about, because people focus on the outcome, and it makes them nervous. And this really happens a lot, when you got a hot girl or something, when you're trying to, you want to get with her, right? Let's just put it that way. But you like her, maybe you want to fall in love with her, whatever. You become nervous because you want this to work, and you end up sticking your foot in your mouth so often because you're so focused on the outcome instead of being mindful of the connection that's being made.
Right.
And that is absolutely huge. And that's something that I can't say always, but it's something that I've really become good at doing when I'm working in my comfort zone, I guess you could say. And so with clients that I work with, that's my wheelhouse. That's why I started excelling in the job that I do. It's just because I had a knack for it. Okay, so it was one of those more natural progressions that came to me in life. I was just able to connect with clients, and so at this point that's kind of easy for me. But then even working with management, even though it may be upper management above me, I still just have, I'm pretty cool, calm, and collected when it comes to working with those people. But when it comes to really higher level people that are outside of my comfort zone, and maybe it's not even necessarily higher level people, there may be other reasons why it's out of my comfort zone, I face that nervousness, and it causes me to trip over things. And so this is a good practice for me, and I hope that, it can help somebody else too, whoever's listening to this.
For sure.
Yeah.
And
I've experienced this so many times in my life. We have to be mindful of our comfort level. In order to get that good, though, you have to practice at it. And so once again, this isn't just something that you practice when you're talking to a high-level psychiatrist. This isn't just something you practice when you're going to go, talk about a contract that you want to sign, or that you're going for this new big executive job and you're nervous about the interview. You could practice this all the time. Practice making the connection with the people that you're talking to. And you do that by being mindful of the moment. You do that by, just taking a conscious look at what's going on, both inside and outside of yourself. Because you have to realize, okay, I'm nervous right now. I got to calm myself down. I've got to do whatever that takes. Be at peace, and then wait for the right moment and let it come to you. And that was just very epiphany-like for me, I guess, in a way. It's very inspiring, I think is a good word. It inspires me because I get it.
Right.
I get it. So
definitely.
Anything else for the Jordan Show?
I don't think so, man. I think we hit on more than what they actually gave us in the podcast.
We did. Of course, we spiderweb. That's what happens. But definitely check out this episode. Of course, this was the Tony Robbins podcast, but this particular episode was aired on January 13th on the Tony Robbins podcast, and it's titled Jordan Harbinger on Social Influence, How Human Behavior and Social Conditioning Influence Our Actions and Reactions. And that's a great title there. Of course, though, check out Jordan on the Art of Charm podcast. It is one of my top 5. I love the Art of Charm, and he has such a diverse range of guests on there. I think almost anybody, if you want to gear your life towards self-improvement, check it out, because you're not going to be disappointed.
Well, he stays with interesting people too, like the people that he interviews. I listened to a Tony Hawk interview not too long ago, and I'm pretty sure I just seen Shaquille O'Neal was on there a little bit ago too. I haven't listened to it yet, but so he's definitely got a diverse crowd that he talks to, but that's good. I think that's what keeps a podcast, especially like the one he's got, alive, is having diverse people. If you have the same type of people all the time, then you just think you're listening to the same thing over and over again.
Right. Keeps it interesting. Keeps it fresh. Popping.
That's right.
Okay. The review that you offered me was a podcast called Mindpump, Raw Fitness Truth. And so this is primarily a fitness podcast, but with that term mind in there, you can just imagine that it also has to do a lot with, things of the mental nature, things that are, dare I say, somewhat cerebral.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Mindpump is hosted by Sal DiStefano, Adam Schaefer, and Justin Andrews. And they pull back the curtain on the mythology, snake oil, and pseudoscience that pervades the fitness industry and present science-backed solutions that result in increased muscular development and performance while simultaneously emphasizing health. And so that's a great little description they have going there for their podcast. And I like this podcast. These 3 guys have a great dynamic. They're funny and they're pretty different. You know, when you listen to each one of them, you can tell they're just different people, but they're all in the same train, right? They're three different people riding in the same train car, and so it's interesting to hear them. But for this particular episode 478 of the Mindpump podcast, their guest for this show was Justin Wren. Okay, and he's also known as the Big Pygmy, right?
I've known about Justin through Rogan, basically. He's been on, this was the 5th time that he's been on Rogan, too. He's been making his rounds as far as podcast goes. He was on Mindpump. He was on Art of Charm. He was on Fighter and the Kid. He was on Joe Rogan. He's been on a bunch of them. But I mainly first heard about him through Joe Rogan. I knew the name previously because of he was in the UFC for a little bit.
Yeah.
As a fighter.
Justin Wren was a kid who was picked on in school. He was bullied in school, and in some harsh ways. I mean, I had a pretty tough career in public school system myself, but I didn't have certain circumstances nearly as embarrassing and disheartening and just like tragic, emotionally tragic as what Justin did as a kid.
I couldn't imagine. Like,
for instance, one of the times that I remember is he liked this girl and went to a party. It was a costume party, and there was this bully guy whose name was also Justin, and he liked to mention that this guy is currently in prison for armed robbery, which is kind of cool, not instant karma, but kind of cool karma.
Right.
But he went to this party. To make a long story short, the girl was like, "What are you even doing here?" You know, she just totally dissed him. And the guy, the other Justin, said, "Man, why don't you just go and kill yourself?" And as kids, especially, man, kids say some harsh things. They have no idea what kind of ripples that makes in the human psyche. You know, for a lot of people, they just said, "Screw you," you know, and went on about their life, and it wouldn't have affected them. But for others, man, that hurts. That hurts them, not just emotionally, but in their psyche. They carry that with them, and it has ramifications that, you know, serious consequences come about later.
Especially that it being that age range. That's not some, you know, words like that isn't something that you can just roll off your back like you can these days. You know, back then you're like, especially the things he was going through on top of somebody telling him that, you know, that's got to be, his psyche had been messed up bad.
Absolutely. And so moving on, and there was a couple of stories about him being bullied, but moving on, he switched schools and ended up becoming a wrestler in school. Actually ended up becoming a fantastic wrestler, and was like, I believe, first in state in his particular weight division. I
think he got a couple of national championships.
National championships, even.
Pretty sure.
So, I mean, like, this guy was really good wrestler, and so he kind of came all into himself, you know, and kind of found his, you know, his flow. And so became a wrestler and then went on into fighting. How did he move on into getting into the MMA?
I think it was just a transition from wrestling. He went to the Ultimate Fighter, which is kind of, for anybody who doesn't know, it's kind of like a competition, you might want to say.
Which is also a TV show, kind of a reality TV show.
Right, kind of like a reality TV show that people would get on. I guess kind of like American Idol, if you wanted to look at it like that. Like it's a competition, and then the winner at the end gets a contract for the UFC. While he was on the Ultimate Fighter, what happened was he was battling an opiate addiction really bad
due to an injury. He had
messed up his elbow really bad. He had tore his tricep or something like that, and apparently they had sent him to was it like a knee and ankle doctor, I think he said?
Yeah, for his elbow.
Right. And the doctor was having to fight with insurance for like 4 months about telling him, you know, he needs to be going to an elbow doctor, not me, you know, basically, which seems,
seems kind of obvious,
but yeah. But anyway, so like for 4 months, he was basically on opiates. Well, of course, this brought on an addiction. And apparently it was just like a downward spiral from there. They ended up voting him out of, was it Ultimate Fighter that he was on that they voted him out of?
Yeah, all the other guys didn't want him there anymore.
Right.
And his coach said, "Man, I hate to say this, I'm the only one that voted for you to stay, though."
Right. the really harsh part was like he was trying, or he said the thing that hurt him the worst was that his best friend called him and told him that he can't believe that his best man missed his wedding. So Justin was supposed to be the best man in his best friend's wedding, and due to this opiate addiction and just the downward spiral he was in, he completely didn't show up, nothing. He just didn't even go.
So this thing that brought him out of that awkward childhood stage where he was being bullied, so he became a fighter and used that kind of as his fuel to get really good and to be aggressive out there, was all seemingly coming to an end because he was about to reach a dream. Right. He was on The Ultimate Fighter, and that's how many guys get to do that? Not very many, right? And so the injury came, but as he put it, it wasn't the injury that kept him from staying on the show and becoming a fighter and realizing his dream. It was the addiction. And so the addiction took him to a place, like it does with so many, to a place where he wanted to die. He wanted, at that time, he wanted to end his life. So he even had an attempt where he took a bunch of pills and drank a half a bottle of Everclear, and he ended up waking up.
Somehow.
Yeah, I mean, somehow, some way, he still woke up, even though he didn't plan on that when he, of course, did that action, when he took all those pills. So, and so that was his rock bottom. That was his ultimate low when that happened, because not only, of course, his family was all worried. They saw him. Of course, they were the ones that noticed how bad his life was as a child, being bullied, and just that. Awkward isn't even the right word for it, but just the bad situation he was in, and how he came into himself through wrestling and then became a fighter, and then now as an addict, and just to a very, very deep and dark low that he was in at that point in time. Yeah. So once again, to kind of condense the story a little bit, at some point in time, Justin had actually what he considered like a vision. It was a vision of a jungle with these people who were in very, very dire conditions. They were in terrible conditions. Some of them were starving, others were being brutalized, and some of them were even enslaved. And it just came to him, the term forgotten came to him. So it was like this crazy vision that he had. Well, sometime later, not too long after that, apparently, he had somebody that he knew, a friend of his, had come to him, and Justin explained the dream to him. And the guy was just like, his jaw dropped to the floor. He says, "You're talking about the pygmies." And Justin's like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I just got back from the Congo. You're talking about the pygmies in Congo." And apparently Justin had no knowledge of these people. And so that guy had just came back. Well, he asked, "Do you want to come with me?" And he prefaced that, at least the invitation, by saying that, "Look, this is dangerous territory. This is like the wild, wild west." The Congo is considered a failed government officially, but as Justin put it, it's more like no government. It's more like no laws. He had people, when he did go over with his friend, there were people that would try to sell him, ivory tusks from an elephant, which is illegal. These are poachers,
right? Or
try to sell him, this and that, some different kind of exotic fur, or different things like that. And so he's like, it's seriously like, it's the wild, wild west where there is no laws. You can go over there, and it's very dangerous. And so at some point in time, he went over there, actually into the Congo, into the jungle, or into the village type of place where these pygmy people lived. And these people are also called the forgotten people. According to their own, by their own volition, they're called the forgotten people because a lot of them are enslaved, and they've been enslaved for generations. And so he realized, this is where I'm supposed to be, and believe it or not, this all came from a vision, which is wild, even though he didn't know the meaning of the vision at that time. So you can take that or leave it, but this is his story. But the part that we can count on is the fact that he went over there and spent some time with these people, and he realized at some point in time, as he looked around, the need was so great. He's like, how am I supposed to help these people? Because, to back up a little bit, he realized, kind of during and post-addiction, when he started to be able to kind of get a grip and come out of that addiction, that he needed to help people. And so he wanted to help people with addictions and things like that, try and help them to come out of that, to be healthy again. But he realized that at that point in time, it was aimless. He didn't really have a good foundation on which to reach out to others and to be helpful. So when he did go to the Congo, it was overwhelming. He was overwhelmed by the needs. Like, how can you help these people? Because it's just, they need everything. They don't have any of the creature comforts that even the poorest people in the United States, have. They have those benefits.
He said he's never seen one that owned a blanket.
Right. Yeah. He says if they do own a shirt, then they're lucky because they don't own two shirts.
Right.
You can guarantee it. And a lot of them don't even own a shirt.
Right.
And so that's how poor they are. And so once again, you see a lot of starvation, you see a lot of brutality, you see a lot of enslavement. He didn't know what it was that he was going to be able to do until one day when there was the death of a child that he actually was holding in his hands when the child died. And they buried the child. He said it was the most brutal burial you'll ever see because in our country, we try to make death as pretty as possible. We dress the person up in their finest suit or their finest dress. Their hair is cut and combed, and they put the foundation makeup on them to make them look as natural as possible, as if they're still a little bit alive, you know. But we try to church it up as much as possible, try to make it as beautiful as possible. He's over there, it's brutal. You grab a shovel and you dig a hole, and you're covering this recently dead body up with dirt, and it was just very heartbreaking for him. But the child had succumbed to a waterborne disease. And so he realized at that point that water is a necessary component for everybody to live, and these people did not have clean water. As a matter of fact, the same water that they used for drinking was the same water that the cows would use for drinking and bathing, and he said there was cow crap just like right there in the water and next to the water.
There's like all green and algae and everything in the water,
Yeah, and so that's the same water they were drinking, and so it occurred to him, okay, my mission is water, right? And so what he began to do was he began to begin the process of digging wells, okay? So as he goes along, the story kind of goes back and forth a little bit because he has to get a lot of support in doing this. It's something that he can't necessarily do by himself, so he advocates for these people, tries to get some fundage, but also through the process, you have to work with the people who own this land because the Pygmies had no land. They were so poor, they didn't have a spot to dig a hole in order to get to the water. And so in order to do that, he had to work with the people's slave owners. And it comes to find out that the slave owners themselves, a lot of them didn't even really want to be slave owners. It had been a generational thing, and so they had been, they had inherited these slaves from their dad and then his dad. And at this point, having to take care of that slave so that they're any good for you to do the work had become less profitable than actually not having a slave and just getting the work done yourself so that you could maintain more of those profits. And so they were down. They were okay with letting go of the people. And so what happened was he consolidated enough support for the clean water because the same people that owned the slaves were also having trouble with getting clean water to drink, clean and healthy water without disease and cow patties floating around.
Right.
And so he did that, but he also had to work with the governments, so to speak. By governments, you consider them like warlords or whatever, because the government was very fractional, and there were people who owned the land. In Africa, he said, you're either really, really rich or you're really, really poor. And by really, really poor, he's talking about maybe not even owning a shirt, right? So that just goes to tell you how poor that people can be.
Well, going back to what you were talking about, how they have to deal with the government to do this, he had mentioned that at first, when they first started talking about digging wells and stuff, that the government wanted to charge them $1,500 every time they dug a shovel into the ground. They wanted $1,500 for the land. I guess they had an attorney that got with him and fought for him. I don't know if he was through Water 4, which we'll get to Water 4 here before long, but he said that he really fought for him, and now they don't have to pay anything for what they're doing.
That attorney was actually a local.
Oh, was a local?
Yeah, he was actually a local guy from there somewhere, but he was really good, and he knew how to compel the government to just to keep on him about it because of that consolidation of support, the populace there was a lot of momentum, a grassroots effort momentum that was coming from the people.
Right.
And so the government officials had to, at some point, say, this could turn ugly if I don't concede to let these people dig these wells. And so it ended up over time that they were able to do it without having to pay any governmental fees. And he says that's what's wrong with a lot of the charities and things that go on today, is because they try to throw money at the government. And so what happens is it never trickles down to where it's supposed to go. So they're attacking it instead of building a grassroots effort. They try to attack the problem from the top down, and that never is. It's usually not effective, because it doesn't service the people that it's supposed to service.
Right.
The government takes the money and divvies it out to the rich people, the landowners, and nothing ever really gets done. And by that time, if you've got $50,000, by the time it gets down to the people themselves, it's whittled down to next to nothing.
Right.
And so the money it goes through too many hands. So this was a grassroots effort just to do it physically, just to dig wells.
Right.
Just to at first physically dig wells with your hands and a shovel. And then eventually, at one point in time, they were able to buy I think $25,000, $50,000 piece of machinery, and they were floating it on 2 boats going down the river. And the whole time it's like, oh, please don't let this sink, please don't let this sink, because this expensive piece of machinery was going to allow people to dig wells like for real.
Well, but the bad thing is too is that even though they were on a boat, once they got off that boat, they were walking with this machinery miles and miles into the Congo where they were actually drilling it.
Right.
It wasn't just like you drive a truck up to the spot you need to drill at and then drill. It's a matter of a lot of people coming together to pack all that stuff miles into the Congo to find out, or to go where they need to be at.
Right. Miles through not just dangerous people with machine guns, which he told a couple of stories where he had machine guns pulled out on him, like several at once, warlord types.
The rebels.
The rebels, right. But also the big freaking snakes over there, and the snapping alligators, and all the crazy bugs and the diseases. This guy's had malaria, I think, 3 times.
3 times,
and has almost died. He had one, I forget what the condition was called, but he had something where his kidneys shut down. He didn't pee for I think it was 2 weeks or something like that.
It was a lot, yeah.
And when he did finally get to pee, he said it was jet black when it came out. And I can just imagine that would freak my stuff, man. I would be done. I'd be fainting and crazy. And
yeah, he mentioned he's had, I think, like Blackwater fever was one of them, and
I think that was it.
There was, I don't know, he had like 3 or 4 different things that he's been through. With it. Malaria 3 times. 2 of them he actually got there. One of them was a reoccurring thing because he came back and fought, and his body was just so wrecked from the fight and dehydrating himself and all that his body reoccurred. The malaria came back at one point.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And he said he even did a TED Talk. And during the TED Talk, that's when he was experiencing malaria again. But he said it worked out well because he actually went back to Africa, back to the Congo, while those symptoms started to occur again, because he was already scheduled to go back. And they have better medicine over there for malaria than what they do over here, because they're so much more prone to contracting malaria over there that they have better medicines and are more prepared. So yeah, crazy stuff. This is just the stuff this guy went through, okay, just to start digging wells. And of course he had these great epiphanies, starting with the vision, but he had to hit rock bottom first. Guy had a tough life, very emotionally charged story that he has, and that's why he's everywhere. But he's not everywhere to promote himself. That's the thing you got to like about Justin Wren. He is there to promote the people of the Congo, the pygmies in particular. And so this is how he got his name, the Big Pygmy, because if you look at Justin Wren, he had to have stuck out in the Congo like nothing else, worse than a sore thumb.
I don't remember if it was on Mindpump or it was on Rogan, but he said that he had to have looked like a vanilla gorilla walking through there.
Yeah, that was it was definitely on Mindpump.
Okay.
Yeah, and so he's got this big, huge beard and long blondish hair, and he's a big dude, and so there's no way this guy's blending in anywhere.
And a lot of these pygmies have never seen a white person before too, so that had to have freaked them out.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine they thought it was a big white gorilla. It's like, look at this animal. I've never seen one of these before.
Right.
So, but they took him in as their own after he showed them, that he was there to help. And he did so much work for them over there. Just the build up to being able to dig that first well and then to dig more, and momentum gained to where what they were doing was They weren't just there to dig a well, and this is very profound. This is something else that where most charities go wrong, because what happens with with our government and the different organizations is they might, for instance, take a plane, fly over somewhere, and drop big crates of food down to somebody. Okay, well that's going to feed them for a couple of days, right, or maybe a week, maybe not, because a lot of times the warlords or whoever is in the area will get that and then keep it and disperse it as they will and starve out the population. What they were there to do, though, was to empower the people of Congo. They were there to empower the pygmies. And that's why they didn't just go in there and start digging wells. We don't want to make it sound like Justin just went there and did this all himself. What he did was he trained them and taught them how to do this for themselves. And that coalition that he built with the others in the area and then also the officials, he was training these individuals to be able to advocate for themselves too. And so they were able to get back some land in order to dig the wells first. They learned how to dig the wells basically themselves, because Justin wasn't a well digger when he went over there.
Right.
So this was a learning process for him too. So when he wasn't almost dying from malaria or getting shot, he was learning how to dig a well alongside these people and empowered them. And so now there are teams that work out there that he helped to create that are over there, and they're expanding their well digging. And he's back here fighting, but he is fighting for them now, because at one point in time, the first name they give him, it translated roughly that he someone who cares for us, because they were the forgotten people.
Well, and that goes back to, okay, so like you were talking about the charity. He said the answer to poverty isn't charity, it's opportunity. So basically, these people come in quite a bit, and I always think about the commercials on TV where you see like I don't know if they're normally the pygmies, but they're small children who you can see all their ribs and everything like that. Don't donate money to this kind of cause, whatever. But he says that these people will come through, throw a bunch of money at this, and take a bunch of pictures and make promises that they'll come back and everything like that, but they never build a relationship with any of these people.
Right.
And that's why it was so important that Justin did that in the first place. When they got there, that was probably the most important part, was building a relationship where they actually trusted him to do the things that he's promising that he's going to do. And now, like you said, now they've trained them to be able to do this stuff for themselves. So it's give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime, right?
That's right. No, I think that's very profound. The point that you made, that the point that you relayed that he made, is that opportunity is better than charity, and that's just it, because you give people charity, but once you're gone, then they're back to ground zero. They're back to to nothing. And so when you give people opportunity, though, when you help them to help themselves, teach them how to dig wells, and all of that, then you're creating sustainability, and that sustainability definitely trumps charity, because charity runs out. But something that is sustainable obviously keeps going, and that's what's so important for these people, was that opportunity.
Well, so I kind of want to get into some numbers a little bit, if you don't care.
Sure.
So the first year that he was there, they drilled 13 wells. Okay, so the following year he wasn't able to go, and he was really worried because he wasn't there to help motivate people. He wasn't there to help and all that kind of stuff. Well, they ended up doing 20 wells the following year. Last year they did 29 wells. So what he said is 62 wells have been drilled for themselves in their own community with their own 18 guys. Well, Water 4, which is, I guess, an affiliate, if that's what you consider it, that they're with, they have 375 guys who drilled 690 wells last year.
Wow.
Which is crazy. So basically what that comes out to is 172,000 people in Africa have clean water for the first time in their lives.
Wow.
That is insane.
For generations.
Right.
First time in generations. That's nuts.
And he also talked about how they're going to implement or trying to implement this WASH program, which is water and sanitation hygiene. They're trying to put up these like kiosks, basically, where they'll actually have to pay for the water, but it would still be a sustainable way for them, for everyone to still get water.
Sure.
Because he said even when he was over there, the only soap that they have right now is car wash soap.
Yeah.
And it just packed full of chemicals and everything. He said that you use it once and your skin's just raw and nasty, and I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, I couldn't either.
Ugh.
Yeah, so that was another thing that they were training to do, was to maintain and to repair the wells, because these wells only lasted for so long.
Right.
And so since they couldn't be there for that long, and it was an important part of their process, by the way, to not stay there for very long. Mm-hmm. It was part of the plan for them to back out and to let the people handle it themselves, so that they became self-sufficient.
Right.
And that's huge. That's such an important concept, because he even mentioned that the village there is like a tourist attraction.
Right.
People actually coming there come there to see how crappy life is, and then they move on the bus.
Right.
They're actually looking at these people like it's some kind of an exhibit to see just how bad life can be for these people who have absolutely nothing but suffering and pain and misery, being brutally murdered, and the disease. That's actually a tourist attraction. Mm-hmm. And so he has only taken just a couple people over with him, because he does not want it to be about that. It's not about that. He doesn't want that to be some sort of exhibit, It has to be something serious. And so when people like volunteers ask, hey, what can I do? Can I come with you to help? He says no, he doesn't want that. He doesn't want that to be, something to pique your interest so you can see how bad it is over there. Mm-hmm. He wants to do it to make them self-sufficient, whatever that takes. And I thought that was also very insightful. The guy had so many insightful things that he come to, these concepts of, why charity sucks. Who would have thought charity sucked?
Right.
But it does in this way, and it makes sense that it does. But also, he talked about, just the tourism that it becomes, just that people just want to take it for the novelty of it, and that's not right. And who would have thought that too? Because at some point in time, you would have thought when somebody asked to volunteer, you'd say, yeah, come over with me. We could all go over there, 100 strong. He says, no, that's not the right way to do things. You don't want to do that, because it becomes a process that doesn't create self-sufficiency for them. Mm-hmm. And it becomes more of a, hey, look at me, I'm doing this, going over to help the people of Congo, these pygmy people, as opposed to, hey, we're building some momentum here for these people to actually help themselves in the long run.
Right.
Well, and that's huge.
Well, I think Rogan even asked him at the end of the podcast, he's like, what's your ultimate goal in this whole thing that you're doing? And he 100% believes that they can knock out the water crisis, the world water crisis within our lifetime.
Wow.
By doing what they're doing right now.
What a lofty goal.
But I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it is a very lofty goal if you think of the world water crisis in general, but if you think about if they can go in within a year in a different place and train them on how to do these things themselves, these communities can do this stuff on their own.
True. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a matter of teaching people how to do it and then them doing it on their own.
Yeah, it's taken the power away from the rich, basically,
right.
or just the people who already have the knowledge, and it's given it to the everyday common people who are in the greatest need. Mm-hmm. And those are the people who really have the most motivation. Like when you don't have clean water and you're drinking cow crap water, it's pretty motivating to get out there and make this thing work and to get clean water. Mm-hmm. And they're spreading that. The people who first learned have spread, that these coalitions are spreading, and they're helping people in other parts of Africa actually do this too.
Right.
And so it's kind of also become kind of a almost like a business model for them, to where they are now in the well drilling business.
Right.
And so the great thing about Justin is that he came back home after over 5 years of no training whatsoever. Mm-hmm. I mean, unless you consider being over there and almost dying and digging wells, I would consider that pretty hardcore, but it's not the same thing. He had no formal fighting training, and so he's come back over here and is working his way back into fighting in mixed martial arts. And now, though, when he says he says he's fighting still for the forgotten.
Right.
So fighting for the forgotten is now his term.
Right.
And so when he goes up there and he fights, it's a platform for him to bring awareness and attention to the need over there, the problem, and specifically for the pygmies, because those are his people. He is the one that loved them, the one that cared for them, and to him, they are like his family. He actually said that he gets homesick, but for Africa,
right,
for them,
Mm-hmm.
He gets homesick for them because he actually, even though he's suffered these crazy diseases and he's almost died, and how dangerous it is over there, that's where he feels like he is most at home, and that's pretty amazing. He says he actually suffers culture shock when he comes back here, as opposed to suffering the culture shock when he goes over there.
Right.
And so having that platform, the fighting platform, because he now fights for Bellator.
Yes, he fights for Bellator now.
Yeah, so having that platform, he is able to express the need and give a shout out to the pygmies during the post fight. So if we could, I'd like to play a clip from YouTube of his last fight, I guess it was. He destroyed the guy, did the whole suplex, and then
Suplex is what he called
a
it.
suplex, and then choked him out till the guy tapped. But then afterwards, did not. I mean, he did say he wants to go for the belt, but he says he's doing this for the pygmies. So check out this little snippet right here.
Together tonight, is that how it felt? Yeah, I mean, definitely. I got a lot of room to improve, a lot of work to do. But yes, it felt like the muscle memory was back. I'm in a camp that is so great for my style with Rafael Lovato Jr. and the team. Big Josh Copeland, I'm just so blessed, encouraged, excited to be here. The little dance I was doing in here, hopefully it didn't look cocky or arrogant. That was my pygmy dance that we do out in the forest. And I just love them to be able to come in here and fight for them.
Most people are lucky enough to have one tribe. You have two. Not only your family in the Congo, apparently here, they were very much behind you. How did it feel to win in front of them, man?
It's just so awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming out here. Everyone from Water 4, Oklahoma City, Dallas, Fort Worth, Eco Survivor. I'm just so lucky, so fortunate. People have jumped behind this because I love to fight. I love to be here and compete. But it's even better to fight for people. And so to know that fighting in here, getting a choke out, I'm gonna go over to the Congo and knock out the world's water crisis for my pygmy family.
Moving forward, you said you have a lot of room to grow, but with performances like that, people are thinking about you in a wide open heavyweight division. What's next for you?
Well, I'm coming for that belt. It's gonna come. It just might take a little bit of time to get there. I'm still getting my feet under me. I had 5 years, 2 months where I did 0 training. And so I'm excited to get back in there, keep working my way up. I gotta earn it. But I have, I think, more of a reason, a purpose, a passion to be in here. And so I'm just so thankful for everyone that's got behind us. Eco Survivor right here is donating 50% of their profits of their entire brand to come to the water wells in the Congo for Water 4, Fight for the Forgotten. Thank you guys for getting behind us.
Before you go, you always talk to your pygmy family. What do you have to say to them tonight?
Nafika hapa kuwapenda. Amagu, nakupenda sana, nawapenda sana. Asante sana, ndugu yangu. Man, I love them so much. I was saying, I'm in here because I love you. That's what I'm in here. Amagu, we are one. We are not different. And so, siku mingi, it's been many, many days. I can't wait to come back and see you guys very, very soon and drill some more wells. So.
The big pygmy, Justin Wren.
So yeah, that's how he ends his fights.
That's intense.
By giving that. And to be honest with you, I would be pretty scared to fight someone who has faced so much adversity and still, lives to tell the story even after 5 years, and it gets back into the ring.
Right.
That guy's got to be tough, man. It's got to be tough.
Insane.
Just mentally and physically. But
So the water4.org is somewhere you can go to donate. That's I definitely want to get that out there.
Great.
I think it's really important that, I know we don't have a whole lot of listeners right now, but we're slowly growing, and I think that anyone who we can get this out to, it's very important. You can see how much passion that Justin puts into something like this. I think it's important that anybody can get their ears around this and, spread it around. So what he said was they had a goal before or by World Water Day, which I think was a week or two ago, of $50,000 to build this water kiosk system that would serve 4,000 people. And he said that they were already at 35,000 because the day before somebody gave 25 grand to the
Wow.
to it, which is pretty insane. But he also said that if someone would give $25 a month for a year, that would give 15 people clean water for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
Which is pretty crazy.
That's
too.
amazing.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you would like to throw in here to close it out?
Just to, check out Mindpump. It's a great podcast. Of course, we found it on iTunes, just like we found Tony Robbins. And that's where we're going to find, a majority of our podcasts are on iTunes.
Right.
And check out anywhere Justin Wren is at. Anything that he supports, any of the charities, the Water for, anything that he does. I feel like he's one of those guys you can count on him to be genuine. The money's going to go where it's supposed to. So if you're looking for a cause out there, find something like this. A lot of the charities are such rip-offs anyway, and you can tell by their overall philosophy, but you can also tell by their practices. I've seen some graphs that show where the money goes for different kinds of charities, and it's pretty bleak. It's pretty sad, to be honest with you. So be very conscious of the charities that you do give for, but instead of giving to charities, give it to an opportunity. And I believe that's what he's supporting, is an opportunity for these people. Right. And it's huge. And it's something he's experienced himself. He isn't collecting money for something that he hasn't actually, somewhere where he hasn't stepped foot on, actually been a part of the process. This guy is the one that started this whole thing, and he was conscious enough to back off of that and give these people this opportunity. So it's huge. I don't think you can find a better opportunity to support.
Well, when it comes to something like that, it's a weird line, because a lot of people give to charity or give money to donate to make themselves feel better,
right? To
make themselves feel good about what they're doing. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel good about giving money or donating to a charity or to whatever the situation is, but it's more about being selfless and thinking about where that money's going to, and thinking about them more than thinking about yourself because you're doing a good thing.
Absolutely. So, to finish off the conversation, be mindful, use critical thinking when you're giving, and by all means give, but find out where you can have the most impact, and just remember this philosophy that opportunity is better than charity. Find a place to give. If you don't give to Justin Wren's causes, find something that models something similar to that, and do that in life, and be conscious of it, be mindful of it. And that's about all I've got. So definitely, keep doing your thing out there, and definitely remember to keep your brains warm.
That's right.
We'll see you next time.
Hey, thank you for listening to another episode of our show. And don't forget to tell your friends, help us spread the word out there. And also remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel and like and follow the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast Facebook page. And while you're on the page, we really appreciate anyone who adds to the discussion on any of the posts, as that is some of the driving fuel that helps ignite our own discussions on future episodes of the show. So keep coming back. We'll see you later. Peace.
This has been another episode of the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast.